The changes the government put in place, for example, if you go to a university now and get a general arts degree, perhaps in philosophy or anthropology, you've got a better chance of getting a work permit coming out of a university than you do out of a trade school.
In your testimony, you also noted the discrepancy of postgraduate work permit allocations with all university degrees that you just also mentioned you wanted to equalize. Do you believe that our immigration system, especially as related to international student permit allocation, should be more closely tied with our national and provincial labor market needed? Should our international student admissions be further tied to housing considerations?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Welcome to meeting number 14 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration.
I was particularly interested in Ms. Vandernap's comments, and I wanted to pick up on that. But if you don't mind, I'd like to give you a bit of a picture of what's happening in my neck of the woods in the Niagara area. As you may know, Niagara College is one of Canada's most well-recognized colleges. But one of the things I've been hearing over the last couple of months with the changes of the program is that somebody coming into Canada as an international student in the past, if they were on a 3-year program, for example, they would generally have the ability to get a work permit for a post-grad placement in Canada. Now we're seeing, for example, that, and Ms. Vandernap, I want you to correct me if I am incorrect here, the changes the government put in place, for example, if you go to a university now and get a general arts degree, perhaps in philosophy or anthropology, you've got a better chance of getting a work permit coming out of a university than you do out of a trade school. I'll give an example. In Niagara College, we have world-class culinary program, distillery program, brewery program, and a hotel and hospitality program that services a good portion of the Niagara region. And you made mention that the acceptance of students must also be based on labor market analysis or regional analysis. But the changes that have taken place, I think, if you would comment, disproportionately impacted those that are going into trades where Canada really needs these workers, but we're now not giving them an opportunity to work here. Would you agree with that?
C'est exactement ce qu'on a présenté.
That's exactly what we said. It's true that the programs in the arts are eligible for a PGWP when everything from trade schools are disadvantaged and it's harder to receive a work permit following that.
Ms. Vandernap, when these changes were initiated by the government, what did you or your colleagues, how did you respond to that? Because it was a severe blow to the training programs that, including Blue Seal and Red Seal programs, where Canada sorely needs people in certain disciplines in trades, particularly in construction, framing, electricians, plumbers, anything in the Blue Seal trade. To me, seems like there is unless changes are made, we're going to lose opportunities and students that we might otherwise bring to Canada for these programs and trainings. We may not attract them at all. Would you agree with that?
Oui, puis nous.
Yes. When we look at the data of our surveys, we see that the attractiveness of vocational programs saw a significant drop. That's what we're seeing. More than 50% of training centers have told us that they saw a more than 50% drop. So it has a serious impact. Jérôme is from a regional vocational training, and maybe he can tell us about what he sees in his neck of the woods. Can I go? So for the Lac-Saint-Jean region, We're in the north of Quebec, around 200 kilometers north of Quebec City. If you look at the situation of our center that provides vocational training, up to 15 of them over the past few years, between 2023 and 2024, we saw 70 new enrollments that dropped to 55 in 2024-2025, and now we're down to 29. We're not a huge school board, but this quality is the same. Earlier, someone mentioned 174 vocational training schools across the province, and this is something we see in all of these vocational schools. If you look at our 15 programs, pretty much everyone manages to find jobs after graduation. So this means that we currently cannot provide enough graduates to fill labor needs.
Merci. Alors.
Affected by the drop in the number of programs that you now provide.
Madame Vandernaam.
On n'a pas.
We don't have the numbers of this year because we weren't able to get the data for the entire province. That data will be available later. But Éducation Internationale saw a 50% drop. But data for the entire province is not available yet. Jérôme gave an example for his vocation training, where they saw a drop higher than 50%.
Madam Chair, how much time do we have?
Perfect timing, 0
very good.
seconds. Next, we go to Mr. Zuberi.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses who are here on Zoom. Ms. Sacco, I would like to start with you. Recently, you appeared at the Official Languages Committee. You also talked about many challenges faced by students. For example, challenges in French Africa or for visa agents. There is a high rate of arbitrary refusals. What recommendations do you have for us to address these issues, including systemic barriers? For student visas, you talked about systemic barriers and high numbers. Exactly. And I believe that you talked about these issues at another committee. Yes, a few years ago. This is the recommendation that I would give to the government to verify with embassies, because many embassies answered the requests of many countries, especially in the Francophone areas of Africa. So work with the embassies to see if it's possible to provide visas instead of going through many countries that require visa requests. That's one recommendation. And the pool is fairly big for them to recruit and to allow more stable French-speaking countries to have the authority to issue visas.
You gave testimony to Quebec's Committee on Citizenship Relations in October. You were advocating for the full recognition of vocational training as a core driver of economic, regional, and linguistic development. Can you walk me through your recommendation on how to tie international students' admissions to the needs of both regions and specific skill trades?
Odile, tu veux-tu répondre? Ou, Je peux y aller aussi. OK. Oui, ben, en fait, ce qu'on a...
What we recommended Quebec's citizen relationship was similar to what we're recommending today. We want vocational training to be seen as an education field just as important as university education. Quebec and Canada needs engineers and doctors, yes. But how can a hospital work without nurses and orderlies? How can a factory run? How can you build icebreakers without machinists and mechanics and welders? It's an essential level of training. And vocational training is there to meet the needs of the labor market. If the labor market has no need, then we will not provide a program. The skills that are needed are the skills that we teach. And we hope that we can train workers that will be sought after in all regions. As there are 174 vocational institutions in Quebec, programs are distributed according to a program based on needs of the region. For example, mine training for miners, there are training programs in places where there are mines, so Abitibi-Chibougamau, for example. And vocational training will fill classes with international students. There are 130,000 students, but we need more than 130,000 people. According to there are around 6,000 to 7,000 of them who are international students. And without international students, it's very hard to reach our targets. So despite the Quebec government's efforts to attract local Quebecers to partake in these programs, it's not enough. So we went to look abroad to fill these classes. And as my colleague Jérôme said, placement rates, and that is the case in Lac-Saint-Jean as well as in other regions, placement rates are very high. Here are some of the needs of the labor market. So, construction jobs. That's vocational training. They need 16,000 new people every year until 2030. The shipbuilding industry. Along the St. Lawrence River, 2,000 jobs for the construction of an icebreaker. So mechanics and welders, for example. For Hydro-Quebec and their major projects, they need 35,000 workers by 2035. Once again, vocational training. Orderlies, which Jérôme brought up. There is a shortage of 6,000 orderlies in Quebec. And I can go on and on. There's aerospace. They have 40,000 jobs that need to be filled in the next 10 years. Vocational training is critical. And we are here to ensure that people recognize that vocational training is strategic. We also want immigrants to work in French, but after their training, they learn French and they can work in French.
On with that, in your testimony, you also noted the discrepancy of postgraduate work permit allocations with all university degrees that you just also mentioned you wanted to equalize. Do you believe that our immigration system, especially as related to international student permit allocation, should be more closely tied with our national and provincial labor market needed?
Une réponse très vite.
Very short answer. That's what we believe in, and the data supports it. You need to look at the labor market needs documented by governments. And you see that vocational training needs a lot of workers.
Can you tell us about how your organization views the importance of focusing on the Francophone immigration outside of Quebec and what these targets mean for protecting the Francophone communities across Canada? in your view, what are the most significant barriers that the Francophone newcomers face when they arrive here in Canada? Whether it is the credential recognition, it's the language instruction, or the pathway navigation, and how do you think federal policies should be aligned to address the barriers the Francophone community faces?
When it comes to the obstacles that you mentioned, I think that there needs to be a concerted effort to work with communities, as Francophone immigration programs are part of a strategy. So looking at these strategies, there has been a lot of studies conducted. There are advisory committees that worked on this issue to see where the government can invest. Language training is very important. You have 1 minute left. You talked about recognition of foreign credentials. So working with provinces and professional orders to ensure that people can start working as soon as possible. Also consult studies that have already been conducted to find recommendations on where to invest to help Francophone immigrants in those communities.
Given your focus on protecting programs that lead in-demand and high-skilled professions, I want to build on that focus. Should our international student admissions be further tied to housing considerations?
Probablement, en effet.
Probably. We often hear that international students put pressure on housing availability. We know that there are housing shortages across many regions, yet we also need workers to build those houses. And construction workers are people who have received vocational training. There are barriers to bringing them in. For example, not all training provide 900 hours of training, and they do not all lead to PGWPs. They can help solve the problem. And once again, our numbers are small. 10,000 foreign students in Quebec was a record year for us. Or else it's usually between 6,000 to 7,000 people. Most of them were in 138 institutions outside of Quebec. And Mr. Garrett said that they can support the 70 or so students who are there and find housing for them. So we are small compared to other larger institutions that take in thousands of students. But we are in another space. So yes, you need to take into consideration settlement capacity. But you cannot just look at the forest, you need to look at the trees.
Regions within Quebec where you think international students would struggle to find affordable housing at current rent prices? I hear what you said about the demand that they would be addressing, but let's focus on their own housing problem at this point. So again, my question is do the international students would struggle in any particular part of Quebec where there are high costs of living?
Je vais laisser ma collègue Odile compléter.
I will ask my colleague Odile answer that because she is in closer contact with a lot of institutions. But if I understand correctly, when there is no availability for students, then vocational training institutions do not accept students because they do not want to send students home because the students cannot find housing.
Are you constantly monitoring the housing situation for students before you do admissions?
Vas-y, Odile.
As Lysiane said, vocational training centers are the best positions because they are on the ground. They will see whether there is sufficient settlement capacity to recruit internationally. They recruit in small numbers, so they can provide services to welcome them, to find housing, etc. So it's the schools that do that monitoring work.
And tying back to an earlier response you had, where you indicated you're not getting enough international students to fill the classrooms. And then on the other hand, you're saying you're only allocating small amounts just in case there are housing issues. Can you elaborate on all of these answers to give us a better perspective of how this program is being managed?
1 minute.
Ben, peut-être je peux laisser
Jérôme maybe can explain how it works in LMIA. So the targets, the number of students, and the impact on the community. So I cannot speak on behalf of all of Quebec, but in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, we created a mechanism to welcome and promote the inclusion of international students. So first, we established our own targets. So around 20% of our programs, of our students are international. So we created that cap to then create a support system. For example, support navigating the immigration system and welcoming them at the airport, amongst others. 20% was the upper limit that we established 2 years ago. But last year, we were only at 14%. And this year, it will be below 10%. So we are really below our theoretical capacity limit that we created.
We know that the government has invested in newcomer women support, entrepreneurship, language training. Are you able to tell us what kinds of federal support for immigrant women in particular has been the most impactful?
Très, très vite, s'il vous plaît.
Very quick answer, please. Currently, I think that there is a national strategy done with the Women's Federation. Women immigrants are part of this strategy, and this has repercussions across provinces because they worked with centers that specifically provide services to women immigrants. The strategy was launched last year and tackles issues surrounding isolation and training for women who are immigrants so they can go to school. It's an issue of employability as well as the support network that will allow these women to be part of the labor force.